let's jump right in. When you think of Australia, what comes to mind? Probably Sydney, Melbourne, those iconic coastal cities, right? But here's the thing, that's just a tiny, tiny fraction of the continent. The real story, the bigger story, is about a massive, beautiful, and almost completely empty land, and we're going to figure out why. This isn't just about maps and geography, it's a real story of survival.
I mean, it's a really good question, isn't it? You've got this piece of land that's about the same size as the mainland United States, but its population is smaller than the state of Texas. So the big mystery we're unpacking here is, how can a place so huge be such a ghost town? And this number, this is what it all comes down to. 95%. Just let that sink in for a second. Almost the entire continent has no significant human settlement. To really get our heads around that, we have to stop thinking of Australia as one place. We've got to see it as two.
And that idea of two Australias, well, that brings us to what you could call the Great Australian Void. See, the whole continent is shaped by this huge contrast, this deep split in its personality, that basically decides where life can exist, and more importantly, where it just can't.
So, on one side, you have the coastal fringe. It's green, it's got plenty of water, and it's where pretty much everyone lives. And then, you have the empty heartland, the outback, red, dry, barren, and almost completely devoid of people. The story of why that 95% is empty starts with the very same things that make the coast so incredibly livable.
So clue number one in our big mystery is this giant wall that runs down the side of the continent. And I think a great name for it is the Rain Thief.
This wall is a mountain range called the Great Dividing Range, and it stretches for over 3,500 kilometers. You can think of it like a massive gatekeeper. It stands there and decides where all that life-giving rain from the Pacific Ocean gets to go, and where it doesn't.
And it all comes down to this really simple process called the rain shadow effect. Okay, so picture this. Moist, wet air comes rolling in from the ocean. It slams into these mountains and has nowhere to go but up. As it rises, it gets cold and just dumps all of its rain right there on the coast. But by the time that air finally gets over the mountains, it's been completely wrung out. It's totally dry. And that dry air sinks down over the interior, baking the land and creating this enormous desert. So the very thing that makes the coast green is exactly what makes the outback so punishingly dry.
But hold on, the Rain Thief isn't the only culprit here. The next piece of the puzzle is buried deep in the continent's geology, which has created what is basically a profoundly thirsty land.
Here's the thing you have to understand about Australia. It's old, like really, really old. And geologically, it's just been very quiet. For millions of years, there's been no major tectonic activity, no big mountains being pushed up, no volcanoes erupting. The result? It's the flattest continent on Earth. And without steep mountains and valleys, you just can't form those huge, powerful river systems that you see crisscrossing places like Europe or North America.
And the consequences of that are pretty stark. There's no Australian version of the Mississippi or the Amazon. The little rain that does manage to fall in the interior, a lot of it just evaporates in the intense heat. Finding water on the surface is incredibly rare and unreliable. And throughout all of human history, there's been one simple rule: no water, no settlement. It's just impossible.
But this story goes even deeper than a lack of water. The next culprit is time. We're talking millions and millions of years of it, which has had a huge impact on the soil itself.
You see, Australia's story is all about isolation. Way back, it was part of the supercontinent Gondwana, which was lush and full of life. But about 15 million years ago, it broke away and started this long, lonely trip north. And for all that time, it's just been sitting there, getting weathered and worn down, without any kind of major geological refresh.
Think about it for a second. Most other continents have had their soils recharged over the millennia. Glaciers from ice ages would grind up rock, creating new soil. Volcanoes would erupt and lay down fresh, fertile minerals. Well, Australia pretty much missed out on all of that. Its soil is ancient, and all the good stuff, all the nutrients, have been washed away over eons. This means that a huge part of the interior just can't support agriculture. It's not just a desert of sand, it's a desert of nutrients. For Australia's first peoples, survival required this incredible, deep knowledge of a land that did not give up its secrets easily.
So, when you put all these pieces together, the mountains that steal the rain, the super flat landscape with no rivers, and the ancient useless soil, you realize that nature has delivered a pretty clear verdict here.
At the end of the day, the story of humans in Australia wasn't about failing to conquer the outback. Far from it. It was about succeeding, brilliantly, by adapting to the reality of the continent. People settled where the land would let them, which was on the hospitable edges.
It's a story of adaptation, not conquest.
And the modern-day numbers just scream this reality. An incredible 85% of the entire population lives within just 50 kilometers. That's about 30 miles of the coast. That makes Australia one of the most coastal dwelling nations on the entire planet, and it's a direct result of everything we've just talked about.
And just to put this into perspective, look at the population density. Australia has about 3 people for every square kilometer. Now, compare that to the US with 36, or the UK with a packed 281. This wasn't a choice people made, it's a geographic fact of life.
So as we start to wrap this up, I think we need to reframe this whole idea. The story of Australia isn't really about a huge empty land just waiting for people to show up.
No, it's a story about the humbling, overwhelming power of nature. It's a perfect example of how, even with all our modern technology, the basic forces of geology, climate, and deep time still draw the lines in the map and tell us where we can and cannot live.
And that brings us to one final thought to leave you with. We started this off by calling the Outback a ghost town, a void. But maybe the Australian heartland isn't empty at all. Maybe, just maybe, it's exactly as full as nature ever intended it to be.